today for another episode of this NDE podcast where we explore all things afterlife and near-death experiences and anything connected to that. This one is from a lady called Camilla F, and this is Camilla's experience. Suddenly the light went out. So this is when I die, I thought. I was lying down on my side of the tent. Everything went dark, and I heard a whooshing sound. I do not know if I fainted or what happened. Suddenly, I was like a small dot inside my forehead, almost like the cast mark on Hindus. My body was like a big shell or protection. All at once, I left my body and started floating upwards. I knew that my body was still in the tent. Everything was dark, and I was somewhere in the air above the tent. I thought of my parents and my brother, who were at the summer cottage on the other side of the island. I did not feel any sorrow, and all the frightening things that I felt before had disappeared. I felt like I was floating upwards in the darkness, but I did not feel any coldness. I was completely aware of what was happening. I felt like I was in the sky, in space among the stars. Suddenly I heard music. Probably some of the others had turned on the radio. It was the most beautiful music I had ever heard. The music was so beautiful, it felt like I was a part of it, like I was floating on the radio waves. It was a famous song from 1968 called In the Year 2525 by Zager and Evans, I later found out. I could feel how I floated higher and higher and further away. Then everything was black, and I felt very alone. I was sad over being so alone and being in the situation I was in, but I could not do anything to change it. Nobody was there to help, and I didn't know what was happening. I was afraid, very afraid. It felt like I was being dragged through a large, dark, wide tunnel, high up and far away by some strong force like a magnetic field. I was in the universe. It felt like time had ceased or did not exist at all. There was no time, just eternity. One day in life on earth was the same as 1,000 years here, or 1,000 years on earth was like one day here. Or maybe there was no time at all, like time was forever. My physical body was not there, but my whole soul was there. My consciousness, all of me. I could still feel my body astrally. In the middle of all the darkness, my consciousness was very bright and clear. I understood in a few seconds the purpose of life. I knew the answers for all the questions that no one had been able to answer. I understood that since I was still a child, I had not committed any sins, so I did not have to answer to any and could go straight to heaven. It felt like it was important not to have committed any sins. Also, I could feel things in my life so far that it hurt me. I looked back a little on my life, and as I did, I knew so much. I knew all the answers to questions that were never even asked. Unfortunately, I do not remember the answers today. I had not known of anybody that had died, so maybe this is why no one came to me. I felt alone and afraid for a while. Suddenly, I could sense somebody or someone else's presence. I felt happy and could discern a bright light far away in the dark. I heard a voice ask me if I wanted to come now. I heard the voice telepathically, and I answered telepathically. In my answer, I said, I am too young to die. I do not want to die now. At the end of the tunnel, I came closer to the light. It got brighter. I saw a figure made of shining light in front of me. I could only see the contours of the person as if through a fog or a haze. I felt such love and warmth. I felt I could have stayed there forever. This love surpassed any love I had ever experienced. The figure showered me with love, stronger love than from my parents or others. A love I had never felt before. It filled my whole body and soul. It felt unconditional love flowing to me from this figure of light. It filled me with happiness, and it was everything I ever needed. Later in life, I always looked for this same kind of love in others, but I couldn't feel that strongly towards anyone except my child. I so much wanted to stay inside this love emanating from this figure of light. I thought that maybe it was God, Jesus, or an angel, but I couldn't tell. Everything I was experiencing was so incredible, I just couldn't tell what it was. My body floated further, and then I felt like I was coming upon a big, thick, high, invincible wall, which stopped me. It felt to me as if the universe was a room that had something to do with this wall. I knew instinctively that if I passed through this wall, I would die for real, forever. I knew I could have floated through the wall, but I chose not to because I really did not want to die. I did not want to leave my mortal life behind. That was my response to the figure of light that I did not want to come. Then I felt myself dragged back through the tunnel, the same way I had come. I thought about what had just happened. The figure of light had offered me a choice. I could have chosen to come through the wall or not. I had been so curious. It seemed as if there was a lot behind that wall, but I could not see what it looked like there. And I knew that if I had found out, then I could not have returned to my life in my human body. Travelling the road back through the tunnel went faster than going towards the figure of light I had experienced. I do not remember any more or how I got back, but I found myself at home with my family later the next day. And that's the end of Camilla's experience, and I will go through it now with a bit of commentary and a few thoughts from myself and unpack it a little bit. So Camilla doesn't go into much doesn't go into much definition or detail as to what actually caused her to cross over, but it says she's lying down in a tent and everything just suddenly went back. And based on what she is saying later on in this experience, it sounds like she's a fairly young child when this occurs. So for her, this moment of crossing from the physical to the next dimension, she suddenly feels like a little dot. So to begin with, there's no tunnel to start at the start. She just suddenly, her awareness goes from her human realm, or what it feels like to be in a body, to being this tiny little dot inside her forehead. Never heard an experience describe something like that before. And then she goes on to describe her body as feeling like a big shell or protection. And I guess the way she's written it there is she still is aware that she has a body, but her awareness of her body is different, because now she is feeling as though she's a little dot, and knows that her body is in the planet Earth, and it is lying in a tent, but she just feels very different to what she usually does, is the way I'm reading this. So she's saying here that everything was dark, and I don't know if this means that her awareness is picking up lots of it's dark, so she can't see anything, or is this just because her consciousness, or this dot she describes herself as, has slipped into another dimension where there is no light? It's kind of confusing reading this again. But she says in this darkness, she begins to think of her parents and her brothers who were on the same island that she seems to be camping on, but she's thinking of them, but she isn't overly concerned. She says she doesn't feel any sorrow or worry about them, even though she feels very different. She doesn't feel as though there's any reason to have any concern about these other people she's thinking of. And then the story progresses, and she starts to float up into this darkness, and she says, even though it's dark, she's still aware of what sort of climate this environment has, and sounds like where she's camping, it seems to be a fairly cold place, because as she's floating up as this dot, she says she doesn't feel any coldness. It's just the same temperature as it was before, or she's in a condition where she doesn't experience hot or cold. I don't know. But even though she is this dot, she is completely aware of her senses and her surroundings and what is happening. So she's then goes on to say, give a little bit more description as to what this darkness actually looks like. And she says it's like she's in the sky, in space, in the darkness, in amongst the skies. So somewhere up in space, where it's obviously very dark up there, and you kind of get a bit of an idea of what she is experiencing when she puts it in those terms, that the experience she's having seems to be somewhere in the universe where there's not much light and just lots of darkness around. So even though she is in this other realm, she's still having thoughts about this physical place we're in, and still hearing some sounds from Earth. And she says she hears this music, and as though someone has turned up a radio. And she says the music that she hears was the most beautiful she has ever heard. And it goes beyond just hearing it. She says it feels like she's a part of it, like she's floating on the radio waves. And then she goes on to tell us what actual song it was. But yeah, I haven't heard In the Year 2025, but that is the name of the song. And as she's hearing this music, she feels like she's floating higher and higher and further away, whatever that means. Does that mean she's getting more lost in space? Does that mean she's moving further away from her body? Does that mean she's becoming more disconnected with her feeling of being human? But anyway, regardless, she says she's floating higher and higher. So I guess we just assume that means away from planet Earth. Then she says everything becomes completely black, and she feels very alone. As I was reading this the first time, it reminded me of a NDE story a colleague of mine told me at work a couple of months ago when she described something similar after having a car crash. She said she was a religious woman too, and she said she had this crash, she left her body, she went into this timeless realm, and seemed to be there for a very, very long time. Was very afraid and was calling out to God and Jesus and past ancestors to help her, and was unable to get any assistance at all when she crossed over into this other realm. And she was afraid, and then she heard these words, "You've got to go back," and then the next thing she knows, she's waking up in hospital with immense pain, like we read in these stories every week. So I see a lot of similarities between her story and what has happened here with Camilla. And actually, the story I just said, the girl who had this accident and crossed over to this other dimension, this colleague of work that I work with, she actually totally went off religion after that experience because, she was out of her body. She was in this other realm. She was in darkness and was waiting for some kind of help from the light, and it never happened. And she stopped going to church after that. So in Camilla's case, it's a very similar situation. She's in this new next realm. She doesn't really understand where she is or what this situation means, but she feels very alone. She feels as though there's no one there to help her. She's very confused, very afraid, and she just feels stuck in this dark place in the universe, which some people, I guess, refer to the void. When people go to this void, though, sometimes they don't feel fear. They're quite content just to be in this space of nothingness, of no sound, of nothing to see. There's no loving feeling either. It's just very neutral. Others, like Camilla, come into this realm and seem to be very upset and distressed by the situation they find themselves in. So Camilla's in this realm, and she says she feels like she is there forever. Like she sort of says, there's no time in this realm. One day on life on Earth is like 1,000 years in this place. Or she says another way of describing it is 1,000 years on Earth was like one day here. So basically, I think she's just trying to explain that this feeling of being in eternity is like. There's no such thing as time, and I guess it's difficult for us as mortal humans in a dimension where time rules us almost completely to really understand what that is like. But most near-death experiences will confirm or support what Camilla's saying here, in that they also have a similar experience where they feel like there is no time in this other dimension, that it just goes forever. And if near-death experiences are to be believed in terms of this is what happens to our souls, our consciousness, when we do finally vacate this physical body, then I guess we all will get to experience this ourselves at one point in time. So she feels in this other realm very detached from her physical body. She feels like she is a soul in this place, and this is who she really is. The body was just a temporary experience that she's no longer a part of, and just now finds herself in this other dimension of darkness. So reading this, it seems like it's quite a scary place, even though it's not hellish in terms of demons and overall negative experience from an external point of view. It's very scary for her from internally, because she's just so confused and uncertain about her current situation and where she sits. So she then starts to progress to the next stage of this experience and begins to receive answers to questions she has. So she's beginning to see the answers to the purpose of life and all the questions, she says, that everyone has on earth, but no one really gets the answer to. She says that because she's a little kid, she hadn't really had an opportunity to commit any sins, but she says that she gets this intuition or knowing that it is important to be as good as you can and not commit any sins while you are in this physical realm. This bit that I just read there about the sins, it's kind of confusing for me to read about that and try to get my head around, because often you'll get some experiences like this where they come back and say that being good and not committing sins is very important, and it's just not an effective way to conduct your life on earth. But at the same time, you hear lots of other experiences that say, we come down here to sin or make mistakes or experience situations that are full of darkness and are created through our own actions and decisions, and these are our teachers to push us in a direction that is more aligned with love, and these darker periods in our lives where we are doing the so-called wrong thing give us that perspective in terms of what living a darker life and when we are able to remove ourselves from situations where we are so we are making decisions that harm us, we can compare that to situations where we are growing, where we are evolving, where we are loving, and I guess these two polars give us the opportunity to choose which way we want to go. So the so-called sins we commit, I don't think it's they have their place, and that might sound weird from a human perspective, but I don't think they're good or bad like they're labelled in think places like the Bible. I think they have their place, and they doing the so-called wrong thing can push us in directions in life that have benefit or growth for us. I'm just trying to think of an example. So say you do the wrong thing, you go and rob a bank, and that, I guess, is a sin, and you end up in jail. But then you get out of jail and you now see the light and how those actions have put you into a situation which isn't pleasant, which would be being in jail. And that has caused you to turn your life around, and when you get out, just go out there and help people and help others not go down the same path. So does that mean that sin you committed in the first place of robbing the bank is a bad thing when it ends up leading to actions that help others? I don't know. This is where I have a little bit of difficulty in the Bible, because and certain religious teachings which say sin is bad, don't do it, and I can obviously see why that is said, but I can see sin being good, if that makes any sense at all. So Camilla then says she has a little bit of a life review. She can she sort of goes through her life and has seen certain actions in her life and people that have hurt her, and she sort of gets the answers as to why these people were acting the way they did. But that doesn't go into much more detail than that. I mean, she is a child and her life review would have been pretty brief, I would have imagined. So, and at the end of that paragraph, she says, unfortunately, I do not remember, any of these answers to the questions I got anyway. So, I guess it's a common occurrence that people drop into this other dimension. They get all these incredible experiences in terms of this knowledge that we all could only dream of in this physical realm, and all the answers to all the questions we ever had. But unfortunately, when they come back to their body, their memory of these answers is erased. So she's such a young kid, and she is kind of wondering, like, I'm in this realm, I'm getting all these answers, but I can't see anyone or really see anything. So why is that? And she sort of thinks, well, I'm young, I don't know anyone who's died yet, so maybe that's why I haven't had any ancestors come to assist me in this journey in this other realm. And as she's kind of contemplating this, she gets a sense that somebody else's presence is there with her. She's not sure who this is or what it actually means, but she just feels or senses another presence. And as this presence begins to make itself known, it takes away that feeling of fear, of confusion, and she no longer feels alone because she now feels like she's got company. Then she begins to not only sense this, she begins to see this bright white light far in the distance. Now, this is another part of these experiences that I struggle with. Like, why does a soul have to go to this void, especially a child soul, and go there for what feels like thousands of years before another figure or loving presence is able to come in there and assist them? Sounds really cruel to me. Like, it just... So, like, I've been reading these experiences for a couple of years now, and although there's a lot of similarities between them, it's hard to understand why certain people experience things they do. Like, it just... So, although on one hand you do get a few kind of questions answered, there's a whole series of other questions that pop up at the same time, and it's frustrating to kind of have to accept that there's no way that me as a human is ever going to fully understand why people have the experiences they do, and because from a human earthling point of view, like a kid having to wait thousands of years before they get some kind of assistance from their fear, it just, of course that sounds very beyond belief from a human point of view. But I should be getting used to this, because every week there's an experience I read where questions aren't answered. So this other figure finally appears, and she is starting to change her perspective of this other dimension, and then she hears, so she sees this light and then starts to hear, or not, she says heard the voice, but then she says heard the voice telepathically. So, I guess experienced someone communicating with her in a way she's not used to is another way of wording that. And she responds by thinking back and answering the thought she just receives with a thought back at the being who sent the thought in the first place. And she says to this being, I'm too young to die. I don't want to die now. And the being then gets brighter and closer, and she actually can actually make out what this being looks like now, and it's like a shining light in front of her, and she can only see the contours of this being as though she's looking through a fog or a haze, and she feels she doesn't get an answer to her question or statement. It's instead this being just begins to radiate love and warmth and this acceptance, and Camilla just feels this intense love is the word she uses, and just wanting to be in this situation for all eternity, and just feels this really strong connection to this being that she doesn't know who they are. But she says it goes way beyond any love that we experience as humans, and it just makes her whole body tingle. She's in a state of bliss, it sounds like. She just feels unconditional love flowing from this figure of light, and it just fills her with happiness and everything she ever needs. She's in a place of total contentment, of not needing anything, of not wanting anything. She doesn't want to move. She's just very happy to be where she is. Now that's the kind of part of these experiences I like to read about, and I'm sure you like to hear about. Is this a place where we all get to end up going to eventually? Is there some part of us that truly does transcend this physical realm and goes to this other dimension and can experience this love that I read about every week? And every part of my being says that I want to experience what I'm reading here too, but there's no way of 100% knowing that. Obviously, what goes on after we die, because obviously you have to die for that to happen, and no one's permanently died and come back. Well, I guess you could say mediums contact people who are dead all the time, and so all we have to go on for those of us who have never had an NDE is what other people tell us has happened. And I guess there's other clues in our physical life as well that transcend scientific explanation in terms of, for me personally, that means a connection to a higher power or guides or God or source or angels or something. Like I've tried many times on this podcast to explain exactly what that feels like, but there's definitely some sort of connection, communication going on with, I don't know what you call it. Is it your higher self? Is it your soul? Is it, there's so many different words for my personal experience in terms of what I feel is going on, and it definitely feels as though there's something external to me guiding me and loving me, and that is a wonderful thing to experience. But it's hard for me to get my head around because I am a human, and because I'm studying nursing. It's a very scientific degree. It's like this happens for that reason, and there's no real way of defining this experience that I have in a way that is understandable or clear, or I'm not the most articulate person, so it's difficult for me to convey to you what that feels like. But I guess for me personally, it's the closest I get to what I am reading in these experiences, and that feeling of love, that not that feeling, but just that knowing that something else is there. And for me, luckily enough, I get another presence in my life, which is like a negative spirit, which can communicate with me, and that is with human words, and that goes on in my head, and that is for me the contrast I need to see what a negative spirit does, and what a positive loving energy does, and it gives me that field of experience to understand a little bit better what is actually going on around me. Like without that negative energy, I'd probably overlook in some ways what this positive loving being or soul or source, or all those words I just reflected on, I'd probably struggle to grasp what that actually was. But that negative entity that is always with me is able to put it all in perspective, and I can sort of see when I'm going down a path that isn't really aligned with the path I want to go down, and then that negative energy will start to remind me in a way that I'm not going in the direction I need to. And then as I start to realize that and push myself in a different direction, then the loving energy starts to pick me up and guide me and carry me in the direction that is beneficial for me in my own personal journey. And that is just a basic way or simple way of me trying to explain what goes on in my personal little world every day. And I'm sure all of us have, if you're listening to this podcast, you've got to have had some kind of a mystical experience or something that makes you believe that there's more to this world than what we can physically prove. Or you could just be here because you're curious about the topic, and either way, you're welcome. I'm happy to have anyone listening to this, because I personally believe that this is definitely a indication of, or an example of what this other dimension is like. And there seems to be a lot of love in there, which is something, like I started this little spiel on, that we can't actually prove, but this is the closest thing we can get to that proof. And if this is the sort of dimension we have to look forward to, then we're in we are lucky people, aren't we? We get to go and spend this time with a figure that seemingly loves us a lot, and it doesn't explain certain things, like having to wait thousands of years to meet that being of light, but eventually that seems to be a direction that we all are on the trajectory to. So after this experience in this dimension that are full of love and intense feelings that Camilla is so drawn to, she doesn't want to leave. And additionally, as she experiences this as a child, when she comes back to Earth, she thinks, okay, so I experienced this incredible love in this other realm. Let's go and find it in this physical world with other people. But of course, she can't. She says she's always been looking for this same kind of love in others, but the closest she's been able to get to experiencing that unconditional love is towards her child. She was so wanting to stay inside this love emanating in this other dimension, but just decided that she didn't want to. She was a kid. She wanted to go back to her mortal body. So even though the power of this other loving dimension was intense, she still felt a need to return to this other realm. And you wonder, like, as a child, if she was another 20, 30 years older, would she still feel the same way? And I think those of you who have listened to this podcast for a while would know that, the older the person gets, the more experienced they are in this physical realm, and understanding of the challenges and darknesses that being a human faces, the less likely they are to say yes to wanting to come back. And it's only some strong draw cards such as family, children that are the final barrier, or the draw that puts them back towards coming back to this physical earth. Because it is hard, people, we all know that. So she's trying to put into words who this being of light was. She says it might have been God, might have been Jesus, it might have been an angel. She doesn't really know. All she knows is it was an incredible experience, and giving the being of light a name or a label or a term is pretty much irrelevant. For her, it was an intensely special experience. So then sometimes you come across this next bit in a few experiences as well. She then reaches this barrier. It's like a wall. It's high, it's big, it's thick. And she feels very intensely that if she were to cross this wall and go over to the other side, that she would be there permanently. She wouldn't be coming back to her human body, and that would be it in terms of being Camilla on planet Earth. So she's kind of thinking, well, do I want to go and check what's out behind this wall? I'm having these strong intuitive feelings that if I do, I won't be able to return. Do I really want to leave my mortal life behind? She decides that, she telepathically tells this figure of light that, yeah, look, send me back. I want to go back to being Camilla. And so she does, and the being of light says, off you go. And she travels back through this tunnel type experience, and it's going a lot faster going back than it was when she came in. And then, the next thing she knows, she finds herself waking up at home with her family, and life for Camilla goes on. Unfortunately, there's no additional comments here in terms of how this experience changed her life, or what her life turned out to be like, because this one happened, according to this, in 1968. So it would have been good to see what happened to Camilla in her life, and how this experience changed her journey. Because as we know, often when people have one of these experiences, or a spiritually transformative experience of any form, their life on earth is vastly different to what it was like before it happened. But I guess as a child, you haven't had much of a life anyway, so there's not much to change. And still, it would have been nice to see if she was a religious woman, or if she practiced sending love and being a loving presence, or just my curiosity, trying to see what happened with Camilla. But that's the end of another experience. I'm very grateful for Camilla for writing this one into End-Earth and giving us the opportunity to explore it, and give us all a taste of what this other mystical, confusing, inexplicable, mysterious dimension is like, and give us some answers, but some more questions as well as to what this other dimension holds, and where we stand in relation to that. It's definitely it's not a clear clear, doesn't give us a clear understanding of what we all have to expect, but just through sheer weight of numbers and people's experiences with near death, it is a little bit more evidence in terms of what we are likely to find ourselves facing when we do take that last breath, and gives us that idea of where other people we know who we've lost have where they've ended up to, and gives us hope. And although this experience didn't give us much teachings as to how to conduct ourselves on earth, I think we all understand that avoiding sin, as Camilla says, is probably, it's hard to even define sin, really. I mean, I guess it's when we do something that isn't aligned with what our intuition says is right. But yeah, it's obviously better to avoid that. But like I discussed when I was analysing it, I don't think sin is a bad thing. It just can lead to outcomes that aren't desirable, but those undesirable outcomes can lead to growth. So yeah, I don't know what advice to say there. Just live your life and learn your lessons and do what feels right, and hopefully you can get guidance and connection to source, and feel that oneness that a lot of people talk about with this experience, and understand that we all are connected and we all have a journey, and in the end it's this dimension seems to be a pretty desirable place to end up. So yeah, thank you for listening to me again for another week. I look forward to talking to you again next time. Be good, and sending you peace and love. Bye.